Canadians may have thought they still had a few weeks before facing Donald Trump's threatened tariffs, but now Trump is threatening to impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports as soon as today.
Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
During his first term in 2018, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel products and 10% on aluminum. Canada responded with countermeasures against billions of dollars of American steel, aluminum, and other products. Eventually, an exemption was granted to Canada.
We have shut the door to China going into the United States. 97% of what we send to the United States is melted or poured in the United States, Mexico, or Canada. So that is a very different scenario. So we are in really good shape, and we think that's the basis for pushing for, exclusion from this global approach.
Our supply chains are so integrated, in fact, that there's a lot of steel that we don't make here in Canada that we use to build, and there's a lot of steel that they can't get anywhere else but Canada in the United States. I mean, this is the outcome of decades of free trade between our two countries.
Meantime, Innovation Minister François-Philippe Champagne says Canadian steel and aluminum support key industries in the U.S., from defense to shipbuilding and auto, making North America more competitive and secure. And Ontario Premier Doug Ford sharing a post that reads in part, "This is the next 4 years, shifting goalposts and constant chaos, putting our country at risk." And Trump is also reiterating his desire for Canada to become the 51st state. He talked about it while speaking with reporters on Air Force One and during an interview with Fox News. Trump confirmed comments made by Prime Minister Trudeau this week about how serious he is about annexation.
The Prime Minister said this weekend to a group of Canadian businessmen, he was at a private meeting, he said that your wish for Canada to be the 51st state is a, quote, real thing. Is it a real thing?
Yeah, it is. I think Canada would be much better off being a 51st state because we lose $200 billion a year with Canada, and I'm not going to let that happen. It's too much. Why are we paying $200 billion a year essentially in subsidy to Canada? Now, if they're a 51st state, I don't mind doing it.
Trump, again, there falsely claiming the U.S. loses $200 billion a year to Canada. Government figures show the U.S. trade deficit in goods with Canada was about $63 billion in 2024. The overall trade deficit with Canada falls to about $41 billion when factoring in a U.S. surplus in services. Let's bring in CTV's Colton Praill now from Ottawa. Colton, good to see you. Now, we still have yet to hear from the president, and now some reports suggest this timeline could be moving?
That's just it. This is the challenge that you run into with Donald Trump, and why so much of this matters when it comes to what comes out of the White House, what's on the order papers, what's on the executive order, not necessarily what the president says. There has been reports from Reuters that potentially this could be coming either later today or tomorrow. Now, that's something that does line up a little bit with what we heard on Air Force One. Donald Trump was talking about tariffs generally, and he said he could have a press conference Monday or Tuesday. Have a listen.
I'll be announcing probably Tuesday or Wednesday at a news conference reciprocal tariffs, and very simply, it's if they charge us, we charge them.
Steel and aluminum tariffs first, but it wouldn't be surprising to see those combined into one larger announcement, perhaps separate executive orders, but one larger announcement. But either way, it leaves us in a situation where we are in limbo, where the industry is waiting, where governments are waiting, and that's in part why you haven't really seen any official responses to this yet. The European Commission called the tariffs unjustified, but said they'd be ready to respond. The president of Mexico, Claudia Sheinbaum, said that they were waiting for communications from the White House, but then they would detail any measures that they would take in response. Government sources telling us the same thing, that they're waiting until they see what is on that paper before committing to anything in particular. And this is the challenge for producers. This is the challenge for premiers, for politicians across the board. Even this morning, Doug Ford was talking about this and said, look, we have to wait until 1 o'clock.
So much uncertainty right now. Is he serious? Is he not? We still, I guess, have to wait a little while longer, perhaps, to find out. But meantime, Colton, Trump is continuing to push his 51st state agenda, having Canada join up with the U.S. How concerning is this?
I think you're starting to see people take it much more seriously. In Saskatchewan, the opposition was just holding a press conference, and the opposition leaders said, this isn't funny anymore. That's the level of seriousness and the level of frustration that we're seeing from Canadians, from Canadian politicians. It's very rare that you get politicians to swear at press conferences, but that's where we are at. That's what's happening. We heard from the ambassador to France, Stéphane Dion, earlier this morning when the National Press Corps in Paris were asking him about this, and he talked about it potentially violating international law, that Trump continues to threaten Canada's sovereignty and continues to suggest that annexation could be in the future. He wouldn't push for official actions from the United Nations or our allies, but those kind of words are even being broached. The idea that he is violating international law is being tossed out by government officials and government representatives is really quite significant. That is, a ratcheting up of the seriousness with which this is being taken. And certainly the hot mic incident we saw last week with the Prime Minister suggests that those at the highest level are taking this seriously, that they do believe that this is more than just a joke. How do we move from here, I think, is the real question, and what options does Canada actually have at its disposal? Because to a certain point, Trump is right. We are so reliant on the American economy, and in the short term, if they do decide to do something incredibly damaging to our economy, there are very few options Canada has at its disposal to retaliate that won't also hurt Canadians.
Scary stuff. All right, CTV's Colton Praill reporting for us from Ottawa. Thanks for this, Colton.
Anytime.